live. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on episode 40. How about that? Episode 40 of Common Grounds for Self-Determination, your weekly podcast that comes to you every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, where we dig into the latest and greatest topics, controversies, issues, news stories, primarily with a lens focusing on the impact for Black and Brown children that are in our public and non-public schools here in the U.S. So thank you for joining us. My name is David Castillo, one of your co-hosts. If you are watching us live on whatever platform you're on, please go ahead and like and share. We've got a very lively and timely topic today. We're going to be talking about the slap that was heard around the world and Chris Rock and Will Smith. So make sure to share this with your friends. It was a terrible April Fool's joke. We're not even going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the role of testing, of assessment in college admissions. So thinking about all of the Black and Brown children that are in high schools today in K-12, going to college, and what the qualifications are to get into college, whether we need to strengthen them or we need to roll them back. Talking about that today. So with that, I want to go ahead and give my co-host an opportunity to check in. We will start with Dr. Cole. Dr. Cole, how's your week been? How are you, brother?
Man, it's been good, man. I'm a little tired, but I'm here. You know, had to slap the face a few times, make sure I don't look like I'm giving y'all half a face, bro. But I'm good, man. Really excited about our work. Really excited that, you know, soon we will be the South Star Classroom podcast. But we just want to make sure everything is set up right for you all. And just kind of going, pushing through. Excited about the project you and I are working on, David, and then just trying to work on the next thing where the three of us can be consulting together. And for the people that's watching and listening, we're a consultancy group first. If you care about equity in your schools, you care about high quality, you care about Black and Brown kids, and you want them to be challenged in culturally affirming ways, then you should reach out to the South Star boys, classroom boys. And if you're listening, just share this, hit us in the comments, send any of us a message, and we can have that conversation. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited that you picked this that you picked this topic and that you're producing today. I like seeing y'all produce. It actually makes me feel really, really good. So I'll throw it to Omar on that one.
All right.
What up, man? It's good to see you all. Thank you all so much for joining us here at the Common Ground Self-Determination, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. It is a good week in El Paso. We are getting into recruitment for our next year. It's exciting. We're starting a 7th grade and a 10th grade. It is an incredibly difficult scenario recruiting these days, simply because, the traditional schools love to hate. And they spend a lot of their time talking poorly about charter schools, which makes me always wonder, all the energy spent talking poorly about us, if that had actually been exerted to solving the problems, y'all would have exemplary schools, wouldn't be no need for charter schools. But there's still a deep need for what we're doing, and we're really excited. We're actually not only honing in on our message at the El Paso Leadership Academy, which is building future CEOs, the CEOs of tomorrow, which is exactly what we are doing, but we're really generating a strategic plan, not just to say it, but to do it. So, 9 entrepreneurship courses throughout their high school career. Microsoft partnerships. They're learning computer science in high school and how it applies in the real world. A leadership curriculum that I've pretty much cooked up on our own. Soft skills like collaboration, time management, and responsibility. So this place, the vision is there, but I'm finally beginning to see the people that we have with us not only capture the vision, but we are now putting forth the very pragmatic steps to making it a reality. So that was a cool week, gents. So I wanted to share that. Power to the students, indeed.
Yeah. Empowered to the ability of charter schools to innovate, like El Paso Leadership Academy. And power to you all for solving problems, creating curriculum, creating solutions for your students. While a lot of the education world, spends a lot of their time not building, but instead trying to tear down the 10% that are actually doing the good work, right? So kudos to you for that, my friend Omar.
Thank you so much, man.
All right. Yeah, man. So we're going to dive into today's lengthy topic. I don't think it's something that we've talked too much about on the show to date, but in education, if you've been around long enough, you know that like in so many other facets of life and business, there's this thing called the pendulum, and it swings to the left and then it goes to the right. And right now we're in this very interesting space in and around public education, where it seems like the A word, accountability, is frequently frowned upon. And so what we're talking about today is two things. We're talking about what's happening with a couple of big assessments, tests that students have to take, or they used to have to take, in order to become eligible for public university. We're not going to get into the specifics, but we're talking about things like the ACT and the SAT. Most people have heard of those. These are tests that high school juniors and seniors take, and it becomes part of their kind of portfolio along with their grades and their community service and letters of recommendation that make up the college application, right? In recent years, what we've seen is a pretty quick dismantling of the ACT and the SAT. Many colleges, probably most big systems, have essentially said that they're no longer requiring those for entrance into college and university. So that means we are relying more, and these systems are relying more on grades and kind of the qualitative, non-quantitative side of determining whether or not young people are actually prepared for a rigorous.
You also got extracurriculars and clubs and recommendations. I mean, it's a formula that's usually being used around that stuff, especially with the large privates.
That's right. So that makes up what's called a college admissions application portfolio, right? With all those different pieces. And so what we're seeing right now is a pulling back of the ACT and the SAT, right? And one big, very well internationally known university, MIT, has just reinstated the ACT and SAT because essentially they felt like it was an important, component in addition to all of the other pieces, in their efforts to evaluate the preparedness of young people to be successful in a school like MIT. The big systems in California, I don't know what's happening in Texas, but I think the CSUs and the UCs have pulled back. I don't know what's happening in
CSUs were never really super hard on it though. They were like, if you had a 3.0, they didn't even look at it. If you were under 3.0, then there was like a scale of, if you got a 2.2, you need at least this SAT or ACT. But yeah, they were always kind of blasé about it.
Yep.
Which makes sense.
Omar, what's happening? Do you know what's happening in any of the big, large, like statewide systems in Texas around ACT and SAT?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same information that you all know, and I think we'll get into this later. There are always like the minimum scores, right? That like the UT system, the A&M system, the Texas Tech system, those are your three largest systems in the state of Texas, and they've got their minimum SAT scores and ACT scores. They'll wind up taking the better of the two. It's a really low threshold. And then there are things like at the UT system where if you're graduating, it used to be top 10. Now with the University of Texas at Austin so large, I think they've scaled that back to like top 7%. In your class, you get automatic admission. So there is a like an understanding of the test it's not necessarily a test optional, but I think that they don't give as much credence to those as, say, highly selective universities where you're having to nitpick everything that you could get your hands on to figure out, like MIT's startling 4% acceptance rate.
Right.
That is a startling rate, ladies and gentlemen. If I started, and I'll pull that up later just to give people an idea, our listeners an idea of like what are the schools and kind of what are those acceptance rates to kind of, it starts making sense. When you got a 4% acceptance rate, you're kind of looking for something to try to whittle it down.
Yeah,
it's
interesting. No, I just think it's interesting. I mean, I think MIT, it makes sense to me that they brought it back because they're MIT. Like, if their thing is more around numbers and the sciences, hard things, data like that. I think that they are trying, like you said, if you only take 4 to 6% of everybody that applies, you are kind of nitpicking every single thing. I think there's levels to it. I mean, again, I said this off camera. I know the right answer to these questions, like from what I'm supposed to be ideologically as a black kid from the inner city that's voted Democrat and this like that. And, all these tests are supposed to be racist or whatnot, but I wanted to do well on my SAT. Like, I remember going to SAT prep and scoring really low in the practice pieces, but I had fun going to those sessions with other people. And I wanted to beat people. I didn't ultimately do super well, but it did matter to me. And I just remember getting to college. I had a 383. I was in that area most of my high school career. And I remember going to college and not knowing what a thesis was. Like, the grades do get inflated. You know what I mean? Like, bars do get lowered at certain inner city schools or certain poor schools because somebody got to get A's. Somebody got to get, you know what I mean? And so I can, an A from a top ranked high school probably ain't the same A as a different type of high school. So I do think that I don't think it should be the sole thing. I kind of think universities have done a decent job on some level. You can always be better, but I think that for UCs, you knew that they were going to be a lot more rigorous. You knew that you needed better grades, better test scores, things like that. But then we also had the CSU system here in California. That's kind of like, yo, if you showing up and you got a decent GPA, you got something over a 2.5, even if you got over 3.0, they didn't even look at your SAT score. And then for young people that like barely graduated or didn't graduate high school, we had the community college that you just got to go sign up and you can start from wherever, like for all the issues and grief I give California, I do think that their university system, aside from loans and grants, the loans and all that stuff, I do think that they kind of, the academic plan of California was kind of strong, even though they've watered it down a lot.
Right. So I think that watering down piece, and I'll push back a little bit because I've seen over the years, I'll focus on like the community college system because that's where I entered my post K-12 college. That's where my timeline starts. I think maybe 10 years ago in California, they realized that, more than half of like Black and brown children that were transferring into the community college system, like, did not even qualify for your basic 100 level English or math course, right? And so you had a huge cohorts of children that were in remedial courses that were essentially non-credit, but you still had to take them to get to that 100 level. And it's not an indictment of the community college system. I think it's more of an indictment of the K-12 system. These are all connected. And essentially what the community college system did back then is they just got rid of all the remedial courses. I don't know what they did instead, but it was a way for them to say, like, we're just going to put everybody in the same like 100 level classes and like Lord of the Fly style, let's see who survives, right? And we've seen what some of that, community college data looks like for Black and brown children in California, probably in other states too, around like how many of them actually within 2 or 3 years successfully matriculate to a college or university, right? The numbers are not promising. So I think we've seen that. The bigger, broader issue here is one of just like external standardized assessments, right? Standardized testing and what role it plays both in college admissions, but more importantly, students feed into college from K-12. And so we're seeing my alarm bells go off when I see, okay, they're going to drop the ACT and the SAT for admissions, or lower its where it sits, in terms of ranking. Okay. At the same time, we're also seeing a major push against standardized testing in K-12, right? The tests are racist. That's what we hear. The tests are a waste of resources. They don't tell anything that we need to know about our children and their families that are living in poverty, right? So I think when I see both of those things happening at the same time, my alarm bells go off and say, like, okay, you can quite possibly have a Black or brown student in K-12 graduate with decent grades and maybe be eligible for a state college, who is probably operating at maybe like a 6th or a 7th or an 8th grade level, right? When you're only looking at grades or the qualitative narrative, like I did all the extracurriculars, but you don't have any hard, reliable, academic, objective metrics to say this child is actually proficient in X, Y, or Z. So the separation of reliable metrics to actually sit back and say, yes, Omar, yes, Charles, yes, David is actually has met a certain level of proficiency or not. And when we take those away, my fear is like we're looking at a massive opportunity for what we call social promotion moving kids forward, because Charles is a nice kid, Omar's a nice kid, right? But I don't know what their critical thinking skills are. I don't know if their writing skills are. I don't know what their math analytical skills are, because we don't have any data, right? That's my concern. So let's start there.
Interesting, like, right, and especially let's look at our podcast, right? Like our podcast. Omar went to one of them schools. Like Omar went to he one of them. You know what I mean? Like Omar actually ended up, where you go? Stanford? Where you go? Stanford, Yale? You went to University of Mars? Where's all the places you went? Like you and your whole crew.
Andre 3000.
Yeah,
down to Mars Girl.
Before we got here, I used to produce a different show for Omar, and him and his whole crew, one of his homies is getting there, at Harvard, right? Like he went to those top schools. I mean, I think common sense has just become, I don't know, man. We in this weird time where we just afraid to apply common sense. And I'm gonna say this as the poor Black kid who had the parents on drugs and lived in shelters and all that stuff. And I think that stuff should play in. I think if there's two kids tied, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, we looked at where they were academically and all this stuff, but we need to make a differentiation. If I got that in my letter, or I've overcome these things and I've done these clubs, I don't have a problem with that type of social promotion. I think that that's somewhat equitable. You know what I mean? Especially if that other person has a place to go. But I don't think that we should just take all standards away. Like I'm the same person that, people get mad at performing arts high schools. Like, let me use an example that's not even college yet. They're like, well, why you got kids testing into a performing arts high school? Well, because the school says performing arts. We need to see if you can perform. Like we need to see if you sing. We need to see if you, act, if you play drums, if you that's what the school is. You know what I mean? I think so. I think California somewhat figured it out, where this progressive level of difficulty to get into here or there. But I do think that our K-12 system should take some responsibility. They should take I don't know. I did a doctoral program, and I'm not trying to rant, but they normally, in my doctoral program, it seemed like they used to have, K-12 people, and then they had higher ed people, and it seemed like they used to be split up. But when I got there, for whatever reason, we were all together, or maybe they were always that way. I don't know, but there were people that were focused on K-12 and people that were focused on higher ed. And higher ed people, they're just annoyed with K-12 altogether. They're just these K-12 people are just on some ish. They're just on some other stuff, and we just got to deal with what we're getting. We just got to get what we get. And, especially our community college people, the community college people were just getting ready to fill in all the gaps that they know K-12 missed. Somebody has to call this stuff out. So, I mean, I get it, man. But I think that it still should be something that's considered. I think you should have as many things as you can consider as possible. And I get it. I get that we think this is racist and all that and stuff, man. And it might be. But I know as a kid taking that test, I wanted to do well. I wanted to do better than people. I wanted to be higher ranked. And I wasn't. But that was a failure, on the system that I came through as well. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm a part of that system, but if I'm in the English class and you teaching me 8th grade level English as opposed to 11th grade AP English, which is what the class was supposed to be, then shame on you. Don't call it an AP class.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a bit. Go ahead, Omar.
You're up. No, please jump in.
I mean, I think it's going into like looking at like freshman, ninth, or first year college. And our students actually prepared. I think you're right. It's a big ask of, colleges and universities to do the amount of catch up or remediation. I don't even know if you can say that word anymore, but I just said it, I mean, that's a huge ask because now students are actually like paying for their education. And so if it's going to take normally 4 or 5 years to finish school, but you got to do 6 because you're not even ready for that first year level of academic rigor, like that's a big ask for these big, large research institutions and the non-research type colleges and universities. So I agree, Charles, it's a K-12 issue. When I was a principal at Oakland Unity High School in Oakland, we took students in. So I'm thinking like I'm now running a 912. We were receiving students from a bunch of different places in Oakland, right? Public district, public charter, private schools. And the first thing that we did was we assessed every single incoming 9th grader during a summer camp, right? So you think of like college and summer bridge. We did summer bridge for high school. And we gave them rigorous assessments. We looked at the data. I don't think, and we actually sorted children. We said, you're on this track. We're going to try and get you accelerated. But we use that to kind of group children based on not the color of their skin, but based on their need. And so I think what I want to drive home is like this idea, like if you've done any work in and around special education, that the assessments, when we assess children, the results of assessments should not generate punishment or consequence. Assessments always drive services, right? And supports. And so, we did that at the high school. We understood at the individual student level what each child needed, and we provided those supports. I don't know if colleges and universities are able to do that. And my fear is that by removing those ACT and SAT type indicators, right, they're actually operating. They actually don't have a full picture of what the needs are. And so that's where my alarm bells go off. I think there's definitely a place for standardized testing. I think all the way through. I think it's how we view it. It shouldn't be used as a punishment. It should be used to identify opportunities, to identify needs and drive services and supports for young people. And that includes K-12, right?
Yeah, man. Go ahead, because you were trying to jump in there too. So
yeah.
Well, I just have a few thoughts. I really appreciate the article that you all sent that we were looking at. So if you want to share that in the chat, it was the first article, not the one about MIT. I wound up reading it, and it was cool to hear the history of where this came from, because I love history and it explains the why. Where the hell did the SAT and the ACT came from?
Yep.
And it was cool. Like what I wound up reading was that essentially in the 1910s and 20s, it was about wealth and it was about privilege and it was about social connections that wound up getting you into college. And as a result, what that did was push out a lot of well-qualified people who otherwise would have been qualified for college from the admissions process. So in 1933, Interestingly enough, from my alma mater, Harvard, in vino veritas, their motto is just veritas. In vino veritas.
I don't know nothing that you just said just now because I went to state school.
He's speaking.
Whatever.
He's speaking in tongues, man.
Look, I went to public school and then state schools my entire college career. So go right ahead.
The doctor on the show is faux humbling himself, ladies and gentlemen.
Have you been to the Bohemian Grove, Omar? Have you ever been to the Bohemian Grove?
The Bohemian Grove? What is that?
The secret society that
you're on mute, bro.
Like Yale stuff.
He says a secret society. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about like Skull and Bones and all that shit. No, man, I'm Mexican. I didn't get invited into that stuff. I've seen them. I know where it's at. And yes, in vino veritas, in wine there is truth. The funny thing is, in 1933, the Harvard president wound up creating a standardized test. And it's saying, hey, if people are getting in because of wealth and privilege, what if this test that was standardized across the country gave greater equity of opportunity to kids who don't have that wealth, but absolutely deserve it? And that's a cool history to understand where this came from, because I could definitely say, man, that's a great idea. The thing with history is you've got to put things into context. 1933. Yo, man, people were driving Model T Fords. 1933, people were still in the Depression. We were post-World War I, pre-World War II. It was a very different time, and it was a very different place than 2022, where I want to bring up a bit of a story and acknowledge something that Bill talked about. So my sister, Soraya, she is an incredibly intelligent young lady. She's older than I am. She's now what? Like, well, no, it's not polite to talk about age, but she's a little bit older than I am. She got to pave the way. She
don't get in trouble now.
Yeah, no, exactly. I caught myself in the middle of that. She wound up going to Stanford undergrad. And I got to kind of see the process that she went through in order to get in. But then I really got to see and analyze who was there. She got placed with a freshman roommate. Her name is Jane. I won't share the last name. Jane's amazing. They are still best friends. Jane wound up not only getting a 1600 on the SAT, but then wrote the SAT, which I think is run by the college review or the college board or the Princeton review, one of the two, and told them that one of their questions was wrong and to correct it. So not only did she get a perfect score on the SAT, but she wound up correcting the SAT. Well, you dig a little bit deeper, and as Bill was saying very astutely, not only was she going to Kumon math since she was, 6 years old, so she was going to school after school, but she had the money, the time, and the resources, and the kind of parental scenario to basically blast everyone on this test. Is that the same equity of opportunity for kids in Oakland? Is it the same equity of opportunity for kids in El Paso? So what I do want to do is acknowledge the fact that historically this was something brought up of equity. We have to ask today if there is an equity of opportunity for achievement on these exams because of the resources. Where I am going to pull a bit and agree with my friend the doctor is that instead of schools saying this is racist, we should do away with this, because it's a whole other topic that I want to get on, which is the fundamental understanding that the A word, accountability, is not just something that is feared amongst schools and school districts. It is something a very small threshold of humans are capable of achieving. Human beings psychologically do not hold themselves accountable. The overwhelming majority of humans across the span of psychiatric tests conducted by Stanford, Harvard, Carnegie Mellon have indicated a very, very simple conclusion. Humans are 1,000% displacing blame on all of their issues on others and rarely accept accountability. So does it surprise me that a school district, instead of looking at the ACT and ACT saying, boy, our kids aren't doing well, maybe we should do something to up the rigor from elementary to high school, as Bill said, increase the rigor so that the test takes care of itself. And how about we provide some SAT and ACT support within the school to provide greater equity of opportunity so that you don't have to go to Kumon Math after school. You're getting it there. Because even just exposure to the kinds of questions and the difficulty of the SAT and ACT is such an eye-opening experience that it creates the drive that what Charles was saying was like, oh, now that I know, I'm going to start preparing more because I want to ace this thing. But when you don't know what you don't know, how the hell are you going to get prepared? So it's been fascinating. And, you know, I want to just put a shout out to everybody on the show today because y'all have done such a good job of unpacking this, but I think it falls down to the lack of accountability of school districts.
Yeah, man. I agree. Can you guys hear me okay? I know I'm trying new.
Yeah, we hear you great, man.
New microphone placements, but I think that like
we got you.
You know, when we're talking about this, again, I know the right answer, you know what I'm saying? The right answer, the YouTube, I mean the Twitter sphere, social media sphere answer is, yeah, do away with it. It's this and it's that. And I think that, listen, man, let me be very clear and be honest. Like when I went, even though I graduated in the top 5-10 percentile of my class, I was still remedial everything. And I needed to be remedial everything. I struggled in those classes too. Like, you know what I mean? Because for the first time, I was getting some things that were on grade level. I was actually, and I wanted to be excellent. I didn't want to just be passed because I was Black. I didn't want to just be passed because of what I went through in my life. And that don't mean that we don't need some help. I think equity is trying to fill in that void and that gap that was there. But I do think that my K-12 school should be held more accountable to that. I don't want it if you just give it to me. I do want to earn it. And there are other ways, right? Like, so in addition to just not doing very well on my SATs, I did have a really good GPA, but I played basketball. I was a captain, you know, going into my last year. I did debate. I won in debate and did a bunch of different clubs. Like I knew the other things that I needed to do to kind of balance that out. I just don't want generations to get away from, there is a such thing as excellence. There is a such thing as like, you know, sometimes kids do better than other kids in certain things. Like life does not care about some of these things is what I'm saying. I think the more we get away from that, like, I just think it's going to be more of a problem come later on in life. It's like, yo, we are all making decisions. And I don't always make the best one, but I remember going into those classes and I put this speech in a lot of my talks. When I went, it was this Black dude that talked to all these incoming Black freshmen. And he said, look to the left and look to the right. Out of the three of you, 2 of you won't be here. And this is at a state college. This is at an easy ass state college. All right. And he was right. You know what I'm saying? It was a lot of people that did have really good grades coming from their schools or whatever. And for whatever reason, right? Maybe some of those reasons were personal, maybe some of those reasons, but on the academic side of it, where the kids that I sat next to, many of us were struggling together and many of us felt robbed and cheated from the schools that we went to prior. And so I get it. I understand. And I'm okay with certain schools taking it away. Like if the CSUs say they're taking it away, it makes sense because common sense tells me there's a quadruple tiered system of California. There is community colleges, there's the CSUs, there's the UCs, and then there's private universities. There's 4 tiers for wherever you are, you can fall into something to get some type of, you know, college experience or whatnot. But it makes absolute perfect sense for MIT to be like, no. We want the math geniuses. We want those people like, because this MIT has a reputation that they want to uphold. And that reputation may be racist. They may not have thought about my Black ass nowhere along the way. But guess what? The world is not fair. It's just not. Like, I want us to get to a place of equity, but I want to raise my kids. I want to raise the kids that I love, my nieces and my nephews, my family. I don't want them thinking that they deserve anything. Like once you start thinking you deserve some stuff, you know what I'm saying? Later on in life as an adult, like you deserve dignity and you deserve respect. You know what I'm saying? But like once you just think that like, yo, this participation thing or whatever, it's gonna be a real difficult life, man. It's gonna be really difficult. And I worked really, really hard. And a lot of people around me worked really, really hard. I wish it would have been. I actually don't wish it would have been easier. Actually, I actually think that it builds character. And anyway, I'm ranting now, so I'm gonna take it off of me. But I just feel like, you know, this conversation has no nuance like we do, but the conversations online have no nuance. It's either don't get rid of none of these tests and don't do this. And listen, like I said, far be it for me to agree with Rick Hess on something, right? It is what it is. And then there's the other side, get rid of all the tests, abolish this and that. Well, that sounds good until my mom about to have surgery. I don't want it to be like, oh, hey, surgeon, how did you get here? And it's like, well, they liked my face. Like, man, if you don't give me another surgeon.
I had good letters of recommendation.
Man. Man.
Let me see your whatever test scores that took you to get into medical school. So we just had a banner change. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I'm not a religious person, right? But I think this movement, you know, while you know people may have good intentions to move away from standardized testing, I think it's really dangerous. And again, we entered this conversation talking about college admissions, but I'm talking about like we got to go all the way back through K-12. You know, we talk a lot about the data from like third grade reading. XQ just put out some stuff. I don't have it up right now, but XQ, if people know the XQ project. They crunched some data for a recent conference. And, you know, we know this. We know that like third grade reading, you're on target or you're not. And if you're not on target, it is extremely difficult to catch up. And there are further repercussions down the line, right? When I was a high school principal, similar to what Cole was saying, you know, I'd sit down and talk with our kids, you know, almost on the weekly. And we would share data with them. We're like, look, you're here, you're in this school. And I'm just going to say, like, there's 30 of you in this classroom. If you graduate from this school with this GPA and you go to college and you graduate, here are some general things that you can expect in your life. If you graduate from this school and do not go to college, here are some things that you can expect out of your life. If you drop out or are kicked out, here's what you can expect. And we know for Black and brown children, there are real life implications. And we know that there's a correlation between standardized test scores and like we could look at NAEP, we could look at, you know, a whole host of other metrics and measure real life outcomes, not for Black and brown children, but for Black and brown people when they leave the K-12 system. So, I mean, this stuff is, we're not just talking about, it's not a political issue. Like this is a real life issue for many people. On the flip side, what I want to say is that, you know, we're focused on the downside of this issue, but what we also need to be thinking about is, you know, there are charter networks, there are private school networks, there are school districts that are actually doing deep work with Black and brown children, high poverty, that are actually doing well on the ACT and the SAT and other standardized measures, right? It's not impossible to do.
Right.
And yes, Omar is right. You know, I don't think we have a Kumon Math Center in East Oakland, California. Maybe Charles, maybe I'm wrong. You got to go to Piedmont.
There's one in Berkeley.
There's probably
if I live
one
in East Oakland, I'm not going to Berkeley.
Yeah, I remember there being one. I just remember one being in Berkeley because I lived in North Oakland, so our Berkeley wasn't that far. It might be though. I don't know. I can look. Go ahead. Keep going.
One other project that we worked on when I was at the high school in East Oakland is another assessment called the California High School Exit Exam, which they got rid of because it was racist. I don't know. We thought it was pretty good. It was something that the students took in 10th grade, and they could retake it and retake it and retake it. And what we did was we looked at the test, we understood the test, and we added sections within our school day, and some of it happened after school, to Omar's point of this adding additional tutoring. Some of it was online using some of the new digital tools platforms
Right.
to help students familiarize themselves with the assessment. So when they took it, it's not all new. What that ends up looking like is a school in deep East Oakland with 90% kids in poverty that are Black and brown, that had some of the highest 10th grade, not passage, but proficiency scores on this test, because there is, you pass or you're proficient, in the state of California. We're comparing to like Pacific Palisades and Malibu. This is East Oakland. And we did it. And when we came up for our charter renewal, they didn't understand it. They're like, how do you do this? And we're like, well, here's how we did it, right? It's not impossible. So I think, what I want to the message I'm trying to say here is like, these things are not impossible. It all depends on the resolve and the will of school systems to actually help students to master and be successful on any number of different kinds of measures. It's easy to say it's racist. It's easy to say it's a drain of resources. It's easy to say that it's not going to give us any useful information. But what else are you doing? What can you bring to the table to demonstrate that you're actually helping children to learn?
There was something that I saw that comment. I was about to comment on that comment. It looks like a few other people want to comment on that comment. Nicole said kids need guidance with finding their purpose and the pathways to perfect their craft. That's not necessarily the SAT. And what I would say is that's not the SAT's job. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That is a system's job. That's a school counselor's job. That's a parent's job. That's a K-12 pathways job. That's even when you go to college and you have counselors and groups and orgs there. But that's not their job. That's like saying, I'm taking this blood test, and that's not measuring like how I breathe or something. Like it's there to test the things that it's supposed to test. And so I'm just saying, like we are, again, I think that we're in this place where we want all things to be everything for all people. And I just don't think that that's realistic. I don't think that that's I don't know. I just feel like instead of just constantly lowering bars everywhere else, it's just like, yo, let me get to the standard, man. Let me get to that place. You know what I mean? Like
I want to comment on that I want to take where you're going with that, because this has been a constant theme of this show. And I want us to think about this, because this sets up exactly why we are a consultancy group, exactly why the South Star Classroom is a consultancy group first and a show later. If you think about what happened, and we had a bit of a discussion about this during our last show, when the advent of No Child Left Behind happened during the Bush presidency, you really saw the advent of standardized testing. Again, the goal, much like the Harvard president in 1933, was, can we find these metrics to understand the bare necessities students will need in order to be like unequivocally literate, have basic math sense? And a lot of people push back on the test, but let's just look at this as a diagnostic tool first. What the unfortunate ramifications of No Child Left Behind was that schools across the country got placed in a scenario where they had to teach the grade level standards. That's not a bad place to be. I completely agree with it. The overwhelming problem is that educators first didn't have the opportunity to then do radical gap assessment. So David talked about this initially, which is he did a ton of assessments, figured out where his incoming ninth graders were, figured out those gaps, and then created a systemic program to fill those gaps. Because if you're in the ninth grade and you're reading at the fifth grade level, you need a lot of gap assessment. The problem that I've seen in K through 12 education is that with the onslaught of No Child Left Behind, teachers are still under the paradigm that I can only teach what is at grade level, which again, you're upping the standard, which is good, but you're then surprised that you have kids both acting up and dropping out. Because if you're in 9th grade reading at the 5th grade level, you're probably not very enthused about what's going on in your classroom. However, if you're at a school like David's, where you're reading at the 5th grade level and you are quickly accelerating your reading and you are seeing the growth, you are feeling the growth, you are seeing your success before your very eyes, you get a jolt of incredible,
it's incredible
motivation. And you see it amongst the kids and the adults, and it lives itself out. So just a quick story. True story. I talk about it all the time. People are always amazed. They're like, you made this stuff up. And I'm like, I wish I did. Years ago, I'm standing in what is now Benitez Hall in our downtown school, sitting by a water cooler. It looks like a scene from The Office. I'm the superintendent at this point, so I try to step back, get a little bit more into the shadows because I want the school principal to be the upfront person, because then they go to that person versus consistently kind of undermining the principal because they're coming to me. So I'm just chilling out. I'm hanging by the water cooler, and this student comes up to me. And I mean, like, you couldn't write this in a movie starring Lou Diamond Phillips. He comes up to me. He's like, hey, mister. Oh, yeah. Yo, I like your school, eh? It's like, thanks, Juan. His name is literally Juan. What is it that you like about the school? Well, mister, I was at the school down the block. He named the traditional school that he was going to. You know, I was in a gang. I was smoking a lot of cigarettes. And I was like, smoking a lot? What, dude? I was getting Fs. You know how many books I read last year, mister? I don't know, on like 7?
Yeah.
0. I was like, 0? And he's like, now, mister? And bear in mind, this is October. We just had started school in August. So the kid was with us like 3 months. Now, mister, I'm getting straight A's. I'm out of the gang. I don't think smoking is a good idea. It's like that clearly is the very best idea that you've pushed forward. He's like, you know how many books I've read, mister? I'm like, I don't know, Juan, 7? 42. You know why Juan read 42 books? Because we diagnosed Juan when he came in, and homeboy was reading at the 1st grade reading level in the 6th grade. But you do some gap analysis, you get those books to like keep climbing up. All of a sudden, Juan's reading 42 books. Juan graduated from our 8th grade class reading at an 11th grade reading level.
Yeah.
Why is it that K through 12 consistently scapegoats and consistently allows for excuses? It gets back to the accountability discussion, but a little historical analysis. I'd say that there's a part to blame with No Child Left Behind, but as a consultancy group, ladies and gentlemen, come hire us, because this kind of gap analysis is the future of education. We have to be able to get in there and not only teach at grade level, but quickly work with students, raise their grade level, raise their proficiency, raise their confidence, and then you will find students absolutely motivated.
Yep.
When teachers say this kid's lazy, I'm like, what do you know about this kid scientifically that can prove that comment?
Bruh, the first book I completed was my favorite book outside of Malcolm X, and Alex Haley's book, and Malcolm X's autobiography.
I love that
the
autobiography.
First book that I read from cover to cover became my favorite book, and ironically enough, we started the show out with it. David started the show out with it. Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies was the first book that I read cover to cover, and it was in high school from the psychology teacher. It's like, come on, man. Like, this is the point. Like, I was a great reader, like, you know what I'm saying? But that wasn't the culture that was being promoted. I just think, to what you're saying, Omar, I just think it's really, listen, I'll just say it like this, yo. It is, you having issues with the Wi-Fi. All All right, this is something that we know about, we care about. And you send the person out like, my Wi-Fi sucks. I'm paying y'all all this money. Come fix my Wi-Fi. And then they come to your house and they say, man, you know, your Wi-Fi is so bad because there's lead in your water. Now, lead in the water is a horrible thing. Lead in the water is absolutely racist because it happens, you know, it's environmental racism. It happens to really poor people without that money and without that bread. And yet and still, I need you to fix my effing Wi-Fi, son. Like, this is like, you still have a job to do schools, PK through 12. You know what I'm saying? You still have a responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta, as Bill just said, we gotta get the lead out the water. But my dude, you work for the cable company. Like, so thank you, schools, for telling me how what I grew up in wasn't fair to me. Thank you, schools, for telling me that, like, yeah, if both your parents go to jail, chances are things are going to be rough for you. But the person that was charged with teaching me English and language arts wasn't fixing the damn cable like they were supposed to. And I just feel like we are great at redirecting parent and students' anger as opposed to actually fixing the part that we are causing. And yes, systems are terrible and systems suck. But you have to know that you have some power within that system. Because if you don't, then why are you showing up? What you doing? What you doing? So we can get rid of all the tests you want. We can get rid of SAT tests. We can get rid of ACT tests. You know what I'm saying? What else next? You want to get rid of cholesterol tests? David, I think I need to test my cholesterol when I go to the doctor. I think I need to run the battery of tests on my body to make sure things are functioning.
Let's get rid of like Fahrenheit and Celsius. Like, doc, I'm freezing my butt off. No, you're not. What do you mean? We don't have a scale to measure that. No, I'm cold, man.
Right. And that's the thing,
there ain't no
man.
cold, man.
It's just so disrespectful. It's so because I was in poverty, I don't deserve to be smart. Like, because I came from poverty means that's why I work so damn hard. And maybe it's not fair, but I'm not aiming for fair. I'm aiming for greatness. I'm not aiming. You don't go to grad school. Listen, man, I remember being in grad school, y'all, and y'all have been to grad school, and I got like you know, you have to maintain a 3.0. For people that have never been to grad school, for the most part, you have to maintain a 3.0. You cannot drop beneath a B average, right? And I remember like asking one of my professors, and Sheldon Jen, I love him. He was one of the best professors I've ever had. And he just said, we were asking him about, we're like, man, this is crazy. He was like, you're getting your master's degree. It means that you are a master of the content. You can't keep a 3.0 average. If you can't keep a 3.0 average on this stuff, then you're not a master of the content. Like, they're trying to get rid of the dissertation and EDD programs. For people that don't know, that's the Doctorate of Educational Leadership. And I'm like, and we're like, yo, doing the dissertation, don't nobody expect your dissertation to be Hamlet. Don't nobody expect it to be the creme de la creme of research. But what it shows is that you are able to perform these things and go through this process. And it's just like, don't stop watering down everything. Is anything have quality anymore? Like, is there quality?
Putting the banner back up.
Jesus.
The banner's back up.
Sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. I got way more angry than I expected to. I
didn't know that they were trying to push back on the dissertation process for EDDs.
Some schools are. I've gotten resumes that will say ABD on it, and that means all but dissertation. And it's like, then go finish the dissertation. Like, then go do it. Like,
you completed, you passed your dissertation. You, to us, Dr. Cole, will always be a very real doctor. Right?
Yeah, man. And here's the thing.
Trying to take Omar's thunder there.
But you know, and I don't get mad about that stuff, right? Like, and I work in healthcare, right? So I also get when people are like, yo, I only save that for medical doctors. And I get it. Because you know why? You want to know why I get it? Because we have a hella hard residency program at our hospital, man. It's super hard. We expect you to do those shifts. We expect you to be on top of all your work. We expect you to still publish and still practice in urban medicine. Like, and if you don't, you know what happens? You know what happens if you flame out? You're gone. You're gone. Because we expect, if somebody's going to have their hands inside of your body, we expect them to be excellent. We expect them to be excellent. Don't you want Don't you want excellence for your kids and for your community? The test should not be making kids depressed. The test should be a reflection of the freaking job we were supposed to do for you. I am never ashamed of how I do on a test. I'm never ashamed because especially if it's about a child, because that doesn't reflect on that child. It reflects on that school that system we keep sending you back to. I'm getting way more worked up than I wanted to.
No, I mean, I think when it comes to this like college admissions piece, I think we got to look at it all the way back to K-12. I think, I'm not like I'm not a crazy person about testing, but I do think that testing plays a very important part in education, along with a whole other host of indicators, of curriculum. Some maybe we can't measure, but I think at the end of the day, with the amount of money that goes into public education, I mean, California's state budget and the money that we put into education versus any kind of demonstrable positive outcome for Black and brown children that we get out of it is a crime of the century. And then they want to pull back from even more measurements of how the system is doing for our children. That's crazy. I mean, I'm just one person on this show, and I think part of our responsibility on the show is to spread awareness. But it's maddening, but we're also not, preaching to say that the standardized test is the one size fits all. It's going to fix everything. It actually fixes nothing. It gives us information. It gives us information about how a particular child is doing, and it gives us information about how certain demographics and subgroups are doing when we disaggregate the data. The responsibility is on the system to change those outcomes. That's why public schools are funded, not just to babysit children or to house children, but to actually ensure that children are growing along a particular continuum as they go from K to 12, right? And there's a whole bunch of assessments that kind of play their part there. I'm a strong believer in that, and I'll never stop believing in that. Even and I think it's true for charter schools. It's true for district schools as well. And so I just think the way that people are pulling back from so much of this is alarming. And I think at the end of the day, it is going to end up, mark my words, let's pull back from SAT and ACT. Let's pull back in California from the SBAC. We already got rid of the high school exit exam. You know what? Forget the reading assessments because they're garbage. You know who it's going to hurt the most? Not the kids that go to Kumon, not the kids that go to this other learning center, not the kids, whose parents, did 2 years in the Peace Corps and then were in, went to, wherever. It's going to hurt Black and brown children. And I think that is where my focus is. And again, I think, it all boils down to accountability for our public school systems. And when people are running from these assessments and measures, it's telling you that your oil's on empty and they don't want to put the dipstick in, right? They're afraid of what the results are going to show. And that is really troubling. It's troubling at, its most benign point, and it's straight up racist, when you really look at it, because people don't want to look at what's under the trunk when they're responsible for it.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to address a couple of comments from Bill and from Demetra and kind of close out on my own because we're wrapping up the show.
You got it.
Is just a quick story, quick closer. The conversation today was fantastic, but if everyone who's listening to our show is noticing a very common theme amongst education, and every time that we have a show, we get down to the root issue here. And when we get down to the root issue, what we fundamentally find out about the world of education is that when there is a situation that is not going well, rather than getting to the root cause and solving it, it is a continuous displacement of blame. It is a continuous scapegoat. It is well, these tests are racist, or the charter schools made us do it, or Beelzebub and Mephistopheles manifested themselves and turned us all into crazy people, and this is why we have to get rid of literacy tests. There is such a fundamental fight or flight problem in education that for some reason in the last several decades, flight has become the common denominator. And I don't understand why, because that is not in any way, shape, or form modeling good behavior for children and for kids. MIT asking for an SAT or ACT score. You're going to one of the most difficult technical schools in the world. Math is a fundamental necessity in that school. And what folks sometimes may not know is that having gone to Stanford myself and Harvard and understanding the level of competition, it's not just that the content's hard. You're working with and competing against some of the smartest people on the planet. I got my butt kicked consistently at Stanford because the level of excellence that my peers were demonstrating was so far beyond my comprehension at the time that it was a extraordinary level of fight, not flight, that initiated my success. It was like, damn, just like Charles said, I should do better. I should strive for more. So I was working 3 times harder than all of my fellow classmates. That is a situation that a test score like an ACT or SAT can help in understanding where a child is at in their fundamental understanding of math and English at a college level, to be like, man, is this going to be a very heavy lift? But is there a bunch of other stuff that we can take into consideration? Because my SAT scores were good. My ACT scores were excellent. But like, I wasn't Jane getting a 1600. She whizzed through her stuff. I did not. But they found something in me that was able to persist. We have gotten to the root issue to say that these scores can be extraordinarily helpful. They shouldn't be the end all be all. But here's a solution to solving this within K through 12 education. Why is it that the South Star classroom in 1 hour can not only deduce, but help solve a fundamental problem in K through 12 education? And yet I'm watching Chicken Little running with their heads cut off about these things are racist. We should abolish them all. We should get rid of them. Let's burn down the literacy tests. Let's burn down the ACTs. Let's burn. I'm like, yo, I don't understand. And I think the root cause today is really about fight. And when we're not fighting for our Black and brown kids and doing the heavy lift and the hard work, we are allowing flight to become the standard operating procedure. And that is absolutely unacceptable for our Black and brown kiddos.
Yep. There you go. So I'm gonna say a couple of quick words, and I'm gonna let Charles close this out. I agree with you, and I'm gonna use your example, Omar. You talked about nuance. You talked about fight or flight, and really what we're talking about here is like, and we talked about the swing of the pendulum, right? We're talking about a middle ground that is common sense, that makes sense for schools and for teachers and for students and for parents and for big systems, to actually use standardized testing, all through K-12, including admissions to college, in a holistic way that identifies both achievements and growth for children and for subgroups. And so pat yourself on the back, teachers and school systems that are doing the good work, and also to identify areas where we can do better. And that's the work that we need to dig in on. It's not a blame game. It's about assessing a situation, assessing learning, and making sure that we're providing students with the resources and support and instruction that they need and deserve. And that's all the way through. And so I'm not arguing for I'm not running away from standardized testing, and I'm not saying that standardized testing has to be the one and all being. I'm saying it needs to be part of a portfolio when we consider how our children are being served in our public education systems. And I'll leave it there. Charles, I'm going to let you do final thoughts and then go ahead and close us out. We're doing good.
Yeah, man.
A little overtime.
I think you did a great job with this topic. I think that, for me, here's what I would say, man. Do whatever you got to do, right? Do whatever you got to do to get what you got to get when a door closes, yo. And then I'm talking to my people. I'm talking to Black people. I'm talking to Black people that might have grown up poor, grown up with traumas, with all that stuff, man. Like, one of the things, and I am not talking about fair. I'm not talking about it. Yes, I want to live in a world that's more fair. I want to make sure that these things happen. I wish you would have got all the things that we deserve that we should have got when we were kids and from these schools or whatever the case is. But sometimes it ain't the case. And sometimes we got to hustle. And sometimes you got to understand the universal rule of, like, listen, 80% of this stuff is showing up, man. It's showing up, and it's being willing to work and being willing to do what the next person's not willing to do. And I had horrible test scores. And it wasn't because I was dumb, but it's because I went to these whack ass schools that didn't push me and didn't test me and didn't make sure that I had an actual mastery over the content, which was their one job. It was their one job. Thank you for caring about the water, yo. But cable guy, I need you to fix the cable. You know what I mean? I think that if we don't, the answer is not always lowering the system, because you're going to run into something where those skills are needed. You're going to run into something at a job where you're struggling at, and it's not going to go your way and you're going to fail. And we're raising people that don't know how to fail and pick themselves back up. We're raising young folks that when you get adversity, we just give up and we just starting to pout, as opposed to, like, yo, rub some dirt on that and get up and go to the next play. You know what I mean? Like, let's use some common sense. Yes, I am okay with state schools like Cal State Hayward. Get rid of the ACT and SAT. Cool, because you wasn't really looking at it no way. You was kind of having this thing to where, you wanted more kids to be able to have access. And I think it's completely fine for institutions like MIT, who say we are the gold standard for mathematics and science, to actually have some type of interest. Like, yo, if you're coming to this school, this is our standard. This is what we want to see. Like, both things can be happening. Both things can be true, man. And I just don't want to. Yep. Anyway, because I'm gonna lose it again like I did earlier, and I don't want to take no steam. I don't want to take no steam away from this amazing show that David.
You can lose anything you want, man, including your upset nature at whack ass schools. Whack-ass schools, the contrary of what South Star classrooms will do for you.
You know what you should, you know what you as a parent should be asking? You should be saying, yo, like, tell me my teacher's jacket. Like, show me their jacket on what they've done and what they've accomplished. I'm curious. Like, if somebody is about to do surgery on your grandmama, right? Don't you want to know their surgeries? Don't you want to know how good they were? Don't you want to know that stuff? So if somebody's, for all intents and purposes, shaping the minds and brains of your children, don't you also want to know their jacket too? Don't you want to know, like, people, for Omar and for David, I am Charles, and you have been listening to another episode of Common Grounds of Self-Determination. We will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat station. I hope you all have a blessed weekend, and I am going to go drink something with alcohol in it, because this conversation has me through the damn roof. And so thank you so much for putting together a great show, David. Share this episode with your friends, people. And with that, we are out. Peace.
Thank you.